I used to be married. 10 years with the same man. From the outside, it looked solid. A family, a house, dogs, routines. The kind of life people assume means you're happy. But inside, I was exhausted in a way sleep never fixed. I felt drained all the time, like I was running on something empty and didn't know how to refill it. At one point, I loved my husband deeply. He could be funny and sharp, the kind of person who lit up a room. He was good with kids, patient with everyone else, always joking, always surrounded by people. I loved our little outings, just the three of us. Game days, small dates, the way he'd sometimes bring me flowers for no reason at all. We matched outfits for events. People used to comment on how close we seemed. But the version of him I loved only showed up sometimes. And when he disappeared, what was left felt unbearable. He was generous with others, but not with me. He provided, but only in ways he decided mattered. He made a lot more money than I did, yet I still paid half, sometimes more, of everything. I put my family first every single time. I delayed my career. I gave up opportunities so he could reach his goals faster. I worked full-time and still took care of his son. Games, practices, meals. I handled the house, the dogs, the day-to-day things no one sees. I barely had time to sit down and breathe. What I got back were late nights. 5 or 6 nights a week, he'd come home late or not at all. Arguments where I was talked over or ignored. Asking for help felt pointless. If it came late and half done. Sometimes I'd wake up and he'd be gone without saying a word. I knew where he probably was, but that wasn't the point. I felt disrespected in front of others. Undermined in front of his son. When he was angry, he'd comment on my weight. Conversations turned into shouting matches so often I stopped trying to talk. Near the end, I was crying 3 or 4 times a week. Our sex life barely existed, and when it did, it left me feeling worse. It was quick. I was always left unsatisfied and somehow made to feel like it was my fault. When I couldn't get pregnant after years of trying, the comments cut deeper than I ever admitted. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I was angry, irritable, always tense. I started wanting space. Then I started dreaming about living alone. And that was the state of mind I was in when everything changed. During the entire 10 years I was with my husband, I never looked at another man in a serious way. I could notice someone was attractive, sure, but it stopped there. When I'm committed, my mind doesn't wander. So the moment I caught myself wanting attention from someone else, that scared me. It felt like proof that something inside me had finally shut down. There was a man at work. I had seen him around for years, knew his face, nothing more. He didn't matter to me at all until one night we ended up at the same small gathering through mutual friends. I stayed in the kitchen with the women. He stayed with the men. We didn't speak. Not once. But I noticed him, and I hated that I did. Time passed. COVID happened. The building we worked in had fewer entry points, so I started seeing him more often. That's when he began lingering. Walking past my desk. Pausing to talk. At first, I kept it short. Polite. Safe. I made a point to mention my husband, the way I always did with men, just to keep things clear. He smiled a lot. He was charming. I assumed he was like that with everyone. Then I realized I didn't want the conversations to end so quickly. I started looking forward to seeing him walk by. I felt disappointed on days he didn't. I argued with myself about it for days. And then I crossed a line I knew I shouldn't have crossed. I gave him a compliment. Then I admitted that I was struggling to keep things professional with him. Saying it out loud felt like stepping off a ledge. One thing led to another. Socials. Numbers. Conversations that got too personal. And eventually, I cheated on my husband. I didn't feel relieved afterward. I wasn't happy. I was disappointed in myself. More than anything, I was angry that I hadn't gone to my husband first with how broken I felt. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't have changed anything. My marriage was already over. I had just been the one to officially end it. I told my husband less than a week later. Things turned ugly fast. He wanted to try. I didn't. I left before the divorce papers were even filed. I stayed with my mom for a bit, then got my own place. During that time, I stayed in contact with the man from work. I told him clearly that I wasn't leaving my husband for him. I needed to be alone. I needed to stand on my own. But feelings don't listen very well. And his were already there. I tried to slow things down. I really did. I suggested we stay friends. Even said we could keep things physical without making promises, just to avoid getting pulled into something too fast. He told me he loved me. I didn't say it back at first. Then I did, because it felt true. It felt easy with him in a way my marriage never had. He was gentle with me. He listened. He made space for my feelings instead of brushing past them. When I cried, he didn't rush me or get defensive. He'd just sit there, sometimes kiss my forehead, sometimes wipe my tears away like they mattered. After everything I had come from, that felt like oxygen. I didn't realize how starved I was until someone fed me something simple. But cracks showed up early. I just ignored them. He told me he had only recently become single. That before me, he'd been married, then jumped into another relationship right away. He said he wanted to be alone for a while. To be free. At the same time, he'd say things like how he could see himself marrying me as soon as my divorce was final. I believed both statements, even though they didn't really make sense together. Eventually, he pulled back. Slowly at first. Short replies. Missed calls. When I finally confronted him, we both cried on the phone and agreed to take space. Boundaries. Time apart. We promised to check in twice a week. He even offered to let me keep his dog sometimes because I'd grown attached after leaving mine behind during the separation. Then the calls stopped. Messages were left on read. One day, he finally admitted he was seeing someone. A woman he had previously told me was just a friend. I felt something break inside me that I had worked so hard to keep together. I questioned every decision I'd made over the last year. I barely slept, barely ate, but eventually I started to heal. Slowly, quietly. Then months later, he stopped avoiding me at work. Small hellos turned into conversations. One day he asked if it bothered me that we still spoke. I told him it would be easier for me to move on if we didn't. That should have been the end. That same evening, he asked if we could talk. Then asked me to lunch. That lunch lasted 4 hours. He told me about his failed relationship, about how miserable he was. He apologized over and over for how he treated me. Promised he'd never disappear like that again. He had a way with words that made you believe him without effort. We became close again. Too close. Not a day went by where we didn't talk. He helped me when I needed a car. Stayed with me most nights while transitioning between places. I held his dog for months. I got hurt walking him once, dragged downstairs when the dog bolted, and he showed up like a hero. It all looked like love. It felt like it. But no one in his life knew about me. Not his friends. Not his family. Not his kids. We were hidden. Always hidden. It started eating at me. The secrecy. The half-truths. The way I existed only in private. When we went out, no one knew where he was. When he was with me, he wouldn't answer calls unless it was family, and even then, he never said he wasn't alone. When I asked about it, he said he wasn't ready. That he was scared after his past. At first, I understood. Then it started to feel like an excuse he leaned on because it kept things exactly where he wanted them. I could feel myself slipping emotionally. So I did the one thing I knew would force clarity. I told him I wanted to be abstinent. We had talked about it before, for different reasons, and I knew choosing it now would either push him to step up or push him away. Less than a week later, he told me he had slept with someone else. I felt stupid for being surprised. Still, it hurt. Somehow, we agreed to try to stay friends. That same night, through text, he asked me to marry him in a year if we were both single. Reading that felt like being pulled back into a fog I was trying to escape. I pulled away a little. Then he did the same thing he always did. Short replies. Long gaps. Silence. Then my cousin called me. She told me she saw him at her job, out to lunch with a woman. She saw them kiss. I remember my stomach dropping so hard I thought I might throw up. When I confronted him, he admitted it. I told him I was done. That I wanted nothing to do with him ever again. I told him I had lost all respect for him, especially because he knew my cousin worked there and still chose to do that. For a few days, I asked questions through text. He apologized but never answered directly. Wouldn't say if she was his girlfriend. Wouldn't say if he loved her. Then one day I realized I was blocked. Everywhere. Socials cleaned. Number changed. Gone. About a month later, I found out he got married. I got physically sick. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I cried every night for weeks. My hair started thinning. I lost weight fast, not in a good way. That heavy silence I remembered from my marriage came back even louder. It took months before I could breathe without thinking of him. Eventually, I did the work. Therapy. Long walks. Journaling. Prayer. The gym. Slowly, real healing. It's been about 7 months now. I'm calmer. I have peace. I live alone. I have a good place, a dog, friends who didn't let me disappear. I still believe in love. I'm just not chasing it anymore. I'm taking life one day at a time. And for the first time in a long time, that feels enough.